Hey everybody, my name is Christopher Archiopoli. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm one of the hosts of the King County Recovery Coalition's King County Recovery Conversations. I want to thank King County Recovery Coalition and Orbit Audio for hosting this. I want to introduce you to my guest today, Holly Mayer. She is one of a good friend of mine. I've known her for a couple years. I met her when she was working at Pocan, and now she has recently started at, is it the Tubman Foundation or the Tubman Center?
Harriet Tubman Center.
The Harriet Tubman Center, and I'll let her talk about what they do there. But yeah, she is a firecracker. She is a powerhouse, whatever strong word you want to use to describe her. I remember like our first meeting she was like a second person in a virtual Zoom meeting. And even in that meeting, she made an impression on me. I remember thinking like, oh yeah, that's somebody I want to know better. She says what's on her mind, and you know, it was really an amazing experience, and I'm grateful to be able to call her a friend now. So
man, that was so long ago.
Yeah, like 2 years.
Oh my
right?
gosh! Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to have you, and so happy that you, because I could tell in that first meeting you weren't sure about me. Like you were.
I'm not sure about a lot of people. Like I'm definitely. It's weird because like I'm one of those extroverts that still is very much like let me read the room. Like I'll still be like my authentic self, but I'm still gonna be like keeping an eye on everybody. And I think when we met, it was me had only been here for a year in Seattle, and I was still figuring out Seattle vibes. And I still am figuring out Seattle vibes.
I mean, I've been here for 18 years. I'm still figuring out Seattle vibes. They change.
You should have seen me this morning. I almost like I should never get on TikTok when I'm on my period because I will just go off on people. And I try to be a lurker, but today, like there was a lady who was going off about like, oh, Trader Joe's cashier told me he doesn't like the rain. And like, she was like pretty much bullying him. And I was just like, bro, like it was such a privileged take. Like for you to sit here and make fun of somebody for not liking the rain in Seattle. Like, oh, you didn't see Twilight. Like, nah, bitch. Like some of us don't even know what that is. Like I didn't know what Twilight was for a minute. And like for her to think like everybody knows or like everybody can just choose where they live. I was just like, yeah, I need to sit down. So I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth today.
Well, that's okay. And actually, I mean, that actually brings up a really interesting thing that happened to me yesterday that I've been kind of wanting to get your take on.
Okay.
So I was on the bus yesterday home from downtown, and, you know, there was a woman with 2 kids, and there was an unhoused gentleman, and he was kind of slouching in his seat a little bit, and, you know, he had a pipe on his lap, and he wasn't doing drugs, but he had this pipe on his lap. And this woman, you know, started yelling at the bus driver, "This man's got his drug pipe out. This man's got his drug pipe out." And I don't always respond, but I said, you know, that's not illegal. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, and we did this sort of back and forth, and, you know, it ended with me saying, you know, he's a human being, mm-hmm. and he deserves to be treated like one. Mm-hmm. And, you know, at some point in the conversation, she said, well, I'm glad you're not a parent. And, you know, to some, like, I don't regret saying anything because I needed to speak up for this person. He wasn't in a position where he could defend himself. And he did get off the bus shortly after, and he didn't do any drugs on the bus. He just was trying to get from point A to point B like most of us. But, you know, I did sort of reflect on that thinking like, yeah, it's not great that this dude had his pipe out on the bus. But I had also witnessed this woman, you know, berating her children at the bus stop and thinking like afterwards, like, yeah, it's not great that he had his pipe out. Like, it's mm-hmm. probably not great that kids are getting exposed to this. Mm-hmm. But also, like, you did more damage to your children by yelling mm-hmm. at them, calling them stupid and telling mm-hmm. them to shut up mm-hmm. than that man did sitting on mm-hmm. that bus. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about you, though, like coming into this interview, because you're a parent, mm-hmm. but you're also someone who is outspoken and like a fierce advocate for people in recovery. So like, what are your thoughts on something like that, where this woman displayed such privilege, but also was protecting her children?
I think as parents, we, number one, I hate when parents say, well, I'm glad you're not a parent, or like, if you're not a parent, don't tell me what to do, or like, you don't understand. Because I've gotten some really wonderful parenting advice from people who aren't parents. Just because you've procreated doesn't give you a license to be like the expert on the subject matter. And it sounds like this woman had other things that another parent like me could go be like, it's not very demure, not very mindful. You yelling at your kids. However, I'm a yeller, like, so, like, whatever. But also, number one, like, one of those balances that I struggle with as a parent and as somebody who's in recovery is the world doesn't owe you or your children censorship, right? But at the same time, like, you should be mindful of how you show up in front of children. But if you're on a public bus, like, I'm sorry, like, not everything is a children's place. And if that person wasn't smoking whatever substance in that pipe in front of my child, I don't give a fuck. If my child is looking at the pipe in wonderment and is like, what is this? I'm going to answer that question honestly. For her to make a scene like that on the bus is fucking ridiculous. And I can only imagine that she was this color. Was she this color?
She was that color.
She was that color. So there goes exactly what I'm saying.
And for those who are only listening, she was a
palm.
a cis white woman.
She was a palm. And what?
A MAGA Karen is how I referred to her in my head.
And what color was the gentleman?
He was also a white person.
Okay.
Probably in his late 20s, early 30s.
Okay, yeah. So, like, us as parents, this is my opinion, so before y'all come for me, this is my opinion. We as parents also have to prepare our children for what they're going to see in the world. So, for example, where I live up in the U District, and our alleyway is a very popular spot for people. And when I first moved here, and like, mind you, I moved here from a very rural area, and then I came here and it was like cold, like in our face for my children. I was used to it, but for my children, it was in their face immediately overnight, right? And I didn't believe in scaring them. I mean, I'm like, yo, don't go touch the crack pipe. Like, if you see paraphernalia, just don't touch it. But if you feel a need to tell me so that I can like either remove it or like warn people, like that's where it's at. I just don't feel like you're number one. And then you're shaming the dude. Like, that dude was just trying to like drive around and like have some reprieve from being homeless. Like, she just wanted to feel good about herself as a parent. But I guarantee you those kids are probably mortified that their mom did that. And were more embarrassed by that than the actual like paying attention to what the guy had. But this is my personal opinion. Also, if I was on that bus, it would have not been good. But yeah, so like, I think as parents though, like what is at the root of it is, and so it's not something that she could probably identify. What we're trying to shield our kids away from isn't necessarily the drugs themselves, but what the drugs represent, which is a response to trauma, right? So if you take out all the layers, we're trying to shield our kids away from trauma. Like, we're trying to shield them away from, like, if your life doesn't go according to how you want it to go, this could be a reality for you. Like, this is a coping mechanism that people take. But we're not willing to, like, peel back those layers as much, because then that has to confront us and our deep side and our dark side. So, yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I appreciate hearing that perspective.
No, you did right.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, because the kids would not have seen this person if she hadn't brought attention to him. He was minding his own business. He was slouched in the seat to make sure that, like, the kids didn't see what he was doing. He was just getting himself oriented to get off the bus.
And how old did the kids look?
The kids were probably, like, less than 10.
Then they don't even know what a crack pipe looks like.
Correct.
Then, like, don't even, they could have, no.
Yeah.
No.
Ironically, as she got off the bus, she told me to mind my own business next time, which I, didn't respond to because it wasn't worth it. But and she had her kids with her. But there could have been words otherwise. But ironic considering she had not minded her own business.
I mean, but yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah. So now that we're done with that, Can you tell people who you are? Like,
Oh.
I know who you are, but like, you want to introduce yourself, get a little bit of your background on like
Yeah.
your story, where you've been in life, like what
God.
your recovery mindset is, like who's Holly?
See, remember I told you before we got on here, I was like, I'm not going to be the prim and proper recovery person.
That's what I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. So I grew up half of my life in New York and then half of my life in Colorado. And I started dabbling in drugs and alcohol at a very young age. I was 12 years old. And the way I was introduced to drugs and alcohol was like, that was just a very normal thing, especially where I grew up. So like, I grew up in a tiny ski town in Colorado. And one of the things that people don't know about these towns, if they only travel there for tourism and stuff, is that the culture of the town essentially embraces the addiction mindset, right? So like, an example of this is like, so when you move to a town like that as an adult, and I'm talking like 30s, 40s, you're essentially moving there to be a ski bum. You want to go work your 9 to 5 job or do whatever and ski on the mountain and then come home and, party. Like, it was very normal for me to see like 40-year-olds at parties for teenagers. Like, that was normal. It was very normal for me to see the parents in my neighborhood be giving my friends like coke or weed or things like that. Like, it was normal. Like, it was like a rite of passage, right? And like, a lot of people don't realize that like these rich little white towns just are flooded with drugs. Like, and I'm not talking about like, just weed. I'm saying like, I was watching people shoot up heroin at a very young age. And mind you, it looks different in these towns, right? We didn't have trap houses. We had trap log cabins. Like, it just, because it doesn't look like you see in the media, it's hard as a child to register like what you're going through, because there's no other representation out there so that you can reference. So to me, that was just normal, right? And then my mom's an alcoholic in recovery. And my dad, you could actually argue he was probably an alcoholic. So it was all around me all the time. And so I didn't even think of myself as like an addict or anything until probably like, I would say 15 years later. Well, no, that's a lie, actually, because I used to go to AA when I was 17, 18. Whenever my mom entered recovery is when I went with her. And yeah, that was, and then because I'm not a traditionalist in recovery, I've gone years without doing stuff and then had relapses, quote unquote, and then went back, and that's the thing for me is I don't think addiction has a one size fits all, because like, number one, I don't like abstinence only. Number two, I think that if you're in different stages of your life, you are able to handle things differently. And I think it removes a lot of power from a person to actually say like, you have to withstand completely from this, because I also think it removes some ability to establish coping mechanisms in your life that will have a larger application besides just, the drugs and alcohol. But I will say this, I have never, aside from my internship for my master's, ever worked in the drug and alcohol field, like directly, right? So as a social worker, I do work with people who are affected by substance misuse, but I don't exclusively look at that for like my employment of choice, just because it's too much for me. Like, I'm just not that person. I'm not. Like, I can be in the peripheral, but not directly. So when I moved to Seattle, we moved here from the east side of the state, me and my 3 children. And I started working at nonprofits, and I, still work at a nonprofit now. But at the forefront of my work is the idea that like, if I could cure the world, what I would get rid of. And I think this is like a Trekkie thought too.
Okay. Gonna bring in Star Trek. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
The monetary system and trauma, right? Like, those, when people ask me as a social worker, they're like, what do you think is going to like heal everything? I'm like, the monetary system and trauma. Like you eliminate those, if you focus on those two things, or if you eliminate the monetary system, like watch what happens, right? You can't do it now, but I've been doing social work for 12 years now. My mom's been in recovery for the past 16 years. And I also think AA is a cult. And NA is a cult, and all that shit's a cult. But I respect people who use it, and it works. So, but yeah.
Yeah, 12, I agree. Like 12-step was never like an effective model for me either. But, like my dad is in recovery, he's in 12-step. Like I recognize that, like it saved a lot of lives. But it's a problem. But, it does have this like very like rigid mentality. And like once you're in it, like you have to preach the word. You have to. And it's literally like there's no difference for me from going to an AA meeting to going to a Christian church. Yeah. That was my same feeling. It's part, as a gay man, like that was part of why 12-step didn't work for me. Cause you're going in, you're holding hands, you're reading from a book, they're asking for money, they're using God with a capital G.
Yeah.
And church has never been like a particularly welcoming place for me and my identity. So it really kept me out of recovery for a long time.
Oh, I bet.
I probably could have been in recovery a lot sooner if I'd found, a non-abstinence based harm reduction model. It took me years to find it. And so what does your recovery look like now?
So I don't do my drug of choice anymore. So my recovery is really weird. So I have actually not done my drug of choice in a habitual way since 2009. However, doesn't mean I haven't done other things since then, right?
Absolutely.
I am a firm believer that if you have a drug of choice, just avoid that, right? Like, and that was for me. I was like, I'm going to avoid this. But like, if like 2 or 3 years from now, like if I want to pick up a glass of wine or smoke a joint, like I'm going to do it and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. Because when I was in the AA meetings and I did have the sponsors and stuff like that, like it just always felt so shame-based. And I'm like, dude, I'm like a Black woman in America who's half gay. Like I get enough shame. Like I don't need another fucking layer. So that is my opinion though. And I will say like, my pattern of relapse hasn't really, I think I've had maybe one since 2009. But yeah, I smoke weed every night. I smoke weed every night. Like that is something I do to fall asleep. I don't drink that often, but that's more medically based, just because I am missing body parts that help with metabolizing it. But I will say with the alcohol too, I will say like alcohol is a gateway to my drug of choice. So there is a part of me that does refrain from that just because I do know like it's a slippery slope for me. But I'm also the type that can go to like, let's say my friend asked me to go to like a bar, just have a drink. I can comfortably be like, one drink and be done. But it's also environmental for me too, right? So like there are certain circumstances and certain patterns of behavior that I avoid that goes along with drinking that and other harder drugs that I avoid largely based on the fact that I know that if I stay in that long enough, it will lead to me relapsing. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I do sort of like the same thing with alcohol. Like it is definitely a gateway.
Yeah.
And I can have one or two drinks. Like if it starts to become more of that, that's when the gate starts opening.
Yeah, you're like peeking through the door. You're like, oh, remember me?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I noticed something that you do when you talk, and we talked about this before, is that you don't name your drug of choice.
No.
And you told me why, but would you share why that is? Because I think it's a really interesting, cool thing that you do.
I don't do it because as you know, in the community of recovery, people make a lot of stereotypes based on what your drug of choice is. And to me, number one, that's just stupid. And this is something admittedly, like I've even done to you, right? When you told me your drug of choice, I was like, nuh-uh. Right? So like, I even still do it to a certain extent. So like, I just avoid that at all costs when it comes to this for me, especially as a Black woman. So the only people who know my drug of choice are my parents and my old sponsor and a handful of like partners that I've had. But other than that, yeah, like, because to me, I'm just like, all you need to know is that I'm in recovery. You don't need to know from what, you don't need to know like the duration, like just know this is who I am. Maybe one day I'll say it out loud, but like, I don't see a point.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And, absolutely that exists, that stigma, even within the recovery community.
Yeah.
It's like, being an alcoholic is fine. But, if you did anything else, and then there's like even tiers within that of like, this one's better than this one's better than this one, better than this one. And like route of administration. And like, there's all of this like hierarchy that exists.
I just want to avoid that. I just want to avoid that. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't mind when people tell me their drug of choice or they want me to speak about my recovery in general. But if they keep poking me about like, just tell me, I'm like, no. And then I just get to be annoying about it because then they're like, then they're bothered. I'm like, oh, too bad.
Yeah, they don't know you well enough. Like, don't poke.
Just don't poke me.
You're just gonna provoke her.
No, because she's
gonna dig in.
Well, and too, like, I just want everybody to realize, like, no matter what it is, the community is a community. The struggle is real, no matter what it is. So why the fuck do we care about if it's alcohol, crack, or whatever it is? Like, I don't care. I just know I see you for what my journey has looked like, and I can recognize certain things in people. And yeah, like, I don't. No. Maybe I'll tell you one day for your birthday.
I don't need to know. It really doesn't, because it doesn't matter, because it wouldn't change, how I view you as a person.
Yeah, I know.
So, but I just think it's really, I notice that that's a sort of rhetorical thing that you do, and I appreciate it and appreciate the.
I mean, it will. If I ever run for office, it will come out.
Okay.
So I won't be running for. Well, I couldn't run for office for various reasons, but. If I did, then like everybody from my hometown would be like, "Oh, yep, we know."
Yeah, the stuff comes out of the closet. I would never run for. I don't think I could ever run for office either.
No, it'd be fun though. Like, dude, it would be kind of interesting to me because that's actually something. Speaking of recovery, I've always wondered, right? Of who was the last president that we had that had like George W. Bush Jr. Right? He was known for being an alcoholic.
Believe so.
Right?
Yeah.
And then people gave shit to Obama for smoking weed. And I was like, y'all just jealous about that one, that he has that much swagger and can smoke weed still.
Well, I think W even admitted to doing cocaine when he was in college,
yeah.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But to me, it's like, and that's another reason why I don't, that's actually another reason why I don't say my drug of choice is because the racial implications of drug addiction and alcohol use in different subsets of the population varies as well. Like, it's cute if you're a drug addict. Right. It ain't cute if I'm a drug addict. Right. And so that's another reason why I just don't do that, because I'm like, why? Like, just so you can add another reason to the list is why you don't like Black people. We're all the same. Like, no. So, but yeah, no, I just, I want more conversations to happen in general versus like, this is this stereotype. This is this stereotype about those addicts. Because, like, I've seen some pretty chill crack addicts, not going to lie. Like, so it doesn't even matter when you mention it because there's so many facets to the drug itself, even how it affects you, how all of that. So, yeah. Yeah,
I agree. And yeah, it's better to just kind of talk about recovery in a very general way and recognize that, we all get to where we are from a place.
Yeah.
So before you started this new job at the Harriet Tubman Center, like, I had never heard of it. So
It's okay. We're new. We new.
can you tell us
We
what it
knew
is?
new.
Like, because I want to know.
Yeah.
And I bet other people have not heard of this either.
Yeah, so it's actually only a few years old. So basically what happened is a bunch of people of color got together and we're like, we're sick of the medical system treating us like trash. We're sick of the westernized approach to medicine. It's not for our people. It doesn't work for us, and they don't even care about us anyway, right? So our founder got together with a couple of people and like, let's do this differently. So the Tubman Center sits out in South Seattle. It's actually in a house. It's down on Rainier, and it's basically healthcare by us, for us, right? All of our providers are people of color, and we do alternative approaches to westernized medicine. So we got acupuncture, we got massage, we got all those things, and so the program that I'm in charge of is called the Guides program. So our namesake, Harriet Tubman, right? The Guides program is named after the Underground Railroad, with us guiding you through your journey, whether it be your medical care, if we have to do social work, things like that, instead of there being that power dynamic of I'm the provider, you're the receiver, this is how it is. And so I'm building the program from the ground up right now. And our guides are going to be doing different things than traditional social work. And for example, we're going to have like our own doula program, and we are getting all of our guides prepared to navigate open enrollment coming up, because that's always fun. But yeah, no, it's great. And I love it. I mean, I've only been there a week, so like, I can't give you like every little breakdown of it. But.
No, that's okay. I mean, that was more than what I knew.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to see and hear about, good work that's happening in the community, because, a lot of attention is drawn to like larger organizations that have been around for a long time. And, we all know those names,
right.
Like we all know those big organizations that, not to take anything away from them because they are making an impact, but there are lots of amazing smaller orgs as well that are doing good work out there that are maybe underfunded, understaffed, under-resourced. And, I try to hope that we can bring more attention to places like that.
So I will say this about the Tubman Center, and this is what I'm so proud of about being part of it, is the founders did it right. And they, instead of being a traditional nonprofit that just scrapes to get everything together, they were very intentional about this. And so, as you know, working in nonprofit can be hard. If you're grant heavy, things get a little stressful. But the Tubman Center was they were very intentional in how they set this up. So we have the Healing Center, which is where our providers are. We also are in the Rainier Leadership Academy. We have our own clinic inside the high school. And then we are actually going to be in 2027 opening up a 40,000 square foot building that's going to have even more services available. So,
do you know where that's going to be?
I saw where it's going to be, but I can't tell you that now.
Oh, I love a secret.
No. It's not secret.
Oh, okay.
It's not. I just don't remember.
Oh, it's like, is this a teaser trailer?
Yeah, but y'all please go on our website and find out, because it's going to be huge, and it's really going to change healthcare here in the Valley. And or in South Seattle. I'm really excited. And yeah, so you can stop by, get a massage. Get some blood work.
Both at the same time.
Yeah, that's the cool thing is, right? You walk in there and we do an assessment of you. We tailor which provider is going to be best for you. We don't just give you a random person who has availability. Like, we find the provider, we find the services you want, and you can just go to one place and have everything provided to you. And it's beautiful. And I wish more places could do this.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know that part of your story is you have a history of participating in sex work as a source of income, and recently the city of Seattle implemented some legislation, the prostitution loitering ordinance, as well as the SOAP ordinance, which is stay out of areas of prostitution. And both of these ordinances are going to make a particularly large impact, in North Seattle, where sex work has been traditionally sort of like, that's been kind of like the centralized hub for sex work. But, as somebody who, has that in their lived experience, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how legislation like this is going to impact that community.
Well, on the outside, it's gonna impact it in a negative way. However, now with technology being where it's at, it's not gonna go away. It's just gonna move online. You're now just gonna have the Aurora Avenue ladies just go online. The pimps are gonna get more creative with how they provide services. And I think, which is really interesting to me, actually, that Seattle is doing this, because we are supposed to be this cute, woke little place that lets everybody do things, but we're really not. Like, this is one of the things I learned in Seattle. Y'all are conservative as hell. You are. Like, I don't care how many tattoos or kombuchas you drink. It's a lie. It's a lie. But who it's going to impact mostly is going to be the people of color, right? Because like I said, with that technology, like, you have to be able to have access to that technology, and you have to be able to navigate that technology well. So you'll see a lot of the white people get on these spaces and dominate and do whatever. But what it's going to cause more is it's going to cause a lot more violence, because you're going to be putting pressure on the Johns to not get caught more, right? So then they're going to want to, with the male ego, like, if they're going to just start killing more prostitutes. Like, that's what they're going to do. Like, and I hate to say it, but instead of, just like driving by, getting their $25 whatever, they're going to be like, oh shit, now I could get caught. I could get real time. There it goes. So I think it's unfortunate. I think it's sad, but I'm not surprised. But don't expect this to really stop it. Like, we're still going to be out here. Y'all. So I don't, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for people who do, have concerns about, sex trafficking in particular, but, like helping people to sort of get out of the life, are there things that you think that might be more effective in addressing things like this?
Number one, all of the rhetoric about sex trafficking out there in social media and like just random conversations is completely false. Like, not completely false. Okay, I don't want to say that. Sex trafficking, people imagine it being like truckloads of women are being like taken off these boats and trucks and everything and like passed on the border. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. What I'm saying is it's happening in your house. It's happening in the houses. There are parents doing this, right? There are religious organizations doing this. There are places that are supposed to be safe places for children, like schools and after school programs, where that stuff is happening. Mm-hmm. So if we really want to talk about how do we talk about the lifestyle, getting out of the lifestyle, first off, you really need to be talking about who starts this. Mm-hmm. And it's not pimps they are made. They're not born that way. Like, when you need quick money, when you need to survive, you're going to do whatever you can to do, right? So, and I also am not the type of person to tell people to get out of the life, because sometimes that life is going to be the best you can do with what life has given to you. So I'm not going to be the person to be like, oh yeah, if you do this and this, then you can get, I'm not that person. Like, I'm a professional person, but there are some days where I'm like, shoot, that was easier. Like, that was so much easier because it's so easy. It's so easy. But now that I'm a parent and I, am working on different goals, and I'm like different, I'm just a different person. Like, now I'm more mad at myself for not charging more. Like, I'm reviewing my prices in my head and I'm like, shoot, I should have really done more. But you know what? People are just mad at women for doing whatever. But what Going back to like one of the bigger impacts too, I'm really worried about the unequal treatment of the sex workers as far as their race and their gender. That is something that I am concerned about. So, but yeah, no, just
well, that was sort of a theme that you talked about how people who use drugs looked differently in that town in Colorado that you grew up in, where it's sort of behind closed doors and it's not as visible. And and you're sort of talking about that the same way with sex work is we see the people on the street, we see the people who are unhoused participating in these activities. And disproportionately, we're talking about often people of color, we're talking about marginalized communities that are being caught up in these, criminal legal systems, and we're demonizing and shaming and stigmatizing people who use drugs and people who engage in the sex trade. But what we often don't think about is that, privileged people are doing this too. They're just not the ones that are getting caught up in legislation like this because they're doing it behind closed doors. They're doing it in the comfort of their homes.
They're doing that, and let's actually like break down what it means to be a sex worker too, because I will be the person to say most women in cishet marriages, you're prostituting yourself in those marriages. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you are literally exchanging being sexually available to your husband to keep a roof over your head, to do all those stuff. So, it's just another form of people to separate themselves and to feel better about themselves. Or like, at least I'm not doing that. But you are. It just, again, if it's packaged differently, I mean, look at us, look at what's happening to Diddy. Everybody's talking about that. I don't like, and Diddy's evil, don't get me wrong, but we're not talking about the power structures that let that happen. And that's what this is all about. Like, if you eliminate the power structures that be to allow this to happen, then you can start having the honest conversations. But these power structures are too embedded in who we are as humans that prostitution is never going away. Drug abuse is never going away. So how do we as a society, as a Western society, make it so that we can be comfortable existing? I'm not even talking about fixing it, but just existing with the knowledge that this is not going to go anywhere.
And so these systems have historically failed us. They've historically
they're still failing us.
And continue to fail us. I mean, I think that there's a lot of evidence to indicate that like this is the things that we have tried have failed. They're not working, and yet we continue to try the same things. If you could think of one or two things that you would implement. We're not running for office, so this is without consequence. Yeah. But like if you were to have a platform, what are a couple of the things that you would want to shift about policy for people who use drugs or people who engage in sex work?
I would make it like commonplace for therapy to be done at a very early age. For the child and the parent. I think especially in the United States, we have created a type of culture that doesn't allow for community to truly be community. And so I would literally burn everything down and start from scratch, honestly. Like, I don't think there's anything that I could recommend in this current state of being that would not ultimately fail anyways because of the structures, right? And I honestly don't know if humans are capable of escaping the things that happen to us. And, like I think about animals, right? And they are able to accept things in a way that we're not able to accept. Like if a bird's going to fall out, or if a bird's injured and it's going to die, it just accepts that, it does what it needs to do. We don't like doing that. We don't like to accept that we are fallible. We don't like accepting that we will die someday. And so really, the one recommendation, I can think of is like, okay, we can't escape this, but let's give you some tools or like some patterns of behavior recognition that you can utilize from a younger age upward that can help you cope with this. Because I will say I have privilege with that. When I was a teenager, I was sent away to one of those bad kids schools in Utah, right? And if it wasn't for me having to sit there for 2 fucking years and do nothing but therapy, do nothing but talk about my problems, I would not be the adult I am today. And that's why I say, like, if you start these conversations younger, then you have a better chance of not having to have as horrible of an existence and experience.
Yeah, too often, we are unable to acknowledge that like the pragmatic approach hasn't worked, and it might be time to
burn it all down.
To burn it all down and start over.
Yeah.
But And to recognize when it's okay. It's okay. It's not weakness to say I was wrong. I'm going to try something different.
No.
And we see that a lot in political conversations where politicians, on both sides are unwilling to say like, I made a mistake. I learned new information. I changed my mind, because it's viewed as weakness to say I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's one of the strongest things you can do is to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm going to do something different.
That is one of the most humbling things about parenting that I've had to learn. Is I came from a very like traditional parenting environment with my parents, like whatever I say goes. And I knew they were full of shit the entire fucking time, but I didn't get to say anything. Well, I did. We know me. I already said it. Yeah. That's why I got sent away, because they were sick of me like pointing out their bullshit. But one of the most empowering things that I have done for myself and also my kids is I always admit when I am wrong. No, okay. Sorry. Not always.
Often.
But it's really weird too, because it's also shame-based and empowering at the same time. I often admit when I am wrong with my kids, especially my oldest, because I know that I've created some trauma with her being my first kid and me being very young when I had her. And the more I've done that, the more I am willing to hear other people's perspectives. Because if you didn't know, I'm very stubborn. Mm-hmm. I'm a Taurus.
I figured that out at some point.
I am a Taurus. So normally I am right. I'm just kidding. But having a 12-year-old humble you, we all of us could stand to get humbled a little bit. And there's nothing going to humble you more than a 12-year-old or a 5-year-old looking at you in the eye and being like, Mama, you're stupid. Right?
Yeah. And we are all stupid sometimes.
Yeah. But I think too, like, because me and you kind of work in similar fields and capacities, one of the things that I think keeps these structures being this way is the fact that when we're in these positions, if we don't figure it out, if we fail, all these other things are affected, right? But it still goes back to shame, right? And it still goes back to not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being productive enough, right? So I think too, that's another problem is like we kind of stagnate ourselves because we're worried that if we make the wrong decision, how that's going to affect everybody else. And I'm not saying politicians are good people, but I'm saying I can see why they move the way they do, right? Because they're talking about systems that affect the entire fucking world. But yeah, just to burn it all down.
Well, we are out of time, but I wanted to ask you just one final question. Is there one takeaway, if you wanted to leave, one parting gift for people that are listening and watching, what's your closing argument?
You're good enough. You're good enough. Just because you didn't do something right or because you did something in your past, it doesn't fucking matter, dude. You're good enough. That's it. Also, Seattle, stop being elitist with liking the rain. Sorry, that was what I was going to go off on TikTok about. Wow. I like how you brought it full circle to close it out. I have to have the last word.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you, Holly. I'm so glad that you were here with me today.
Yeah.
I appreciate you making the time on a Sunday. Me. And, thank you.
Can we do this again?
let's have a redo
Can
in,
we?
in
Yeah.
a year.
Let's see if I've changed my mind. I'm
could-
sure I have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're always learning new things.
We are. And I will have done a lot more of a deep dive on Star Trek because I've only done like 3 generations, or I don't even know how to categorize it.
I'll give you notes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you to the listeners of King County Recovery Conversations. Thank you to the King County Recovery Coalition and Orbit Audio for allowing this to happen. And thank you, Holly, for being here. And remember that you're enough.
Yay.